Hi again. I'd like to continue my discussion of Parse, and here I am. I've got my Parse app. This is done with JavaScript, and it's pretty simple. It lists all of these products here, and it lists the name and the price. And if I look at my app here on the Parse website, I'll see that I have this class called test object, and it's got 8 items in it. And then it's got some table. The table here has fields for name and price, and it lists the values there. And so this is what we're seeing on the website. And then we also set up a form here that lets you add new items. So if I want to say, like new item, and then give it a price of $99, then I can say submit. And it doesn't update here, but if I refresh the page, I see new item at the bottom. Okay, and then if I go back to Parse here and I refresh or reload the data here, new item will appear on the list. Okay, so we got a communication here between our website through the form and the Parse website over the internet, right? So so how do we get this to update automatically, and then how do we display, let's say, a detailed view of the product? Like, if you clicked on the product here, we might want to see some more information about it, right? So let's talk about those things. So first of all, to get our site to update, I'm looking at my site here, and you can see I've initialized Parse, and then I've got this function here called get products, and this loads all the products on the site. Okay, and it displays them in the products div here as a series of paragraph tags. And so you can see I've got this variable here called output, and on a successful query to parse, we're going to return, or we're going to receive an array of result objects. So we loop through those result objects, and then we're going to add some HTML markup as text string to this output variable. Output, and we're doing plus equal to append. Right, and we're going to append this paragraph, add the name and price, put the closing paragraph tag, and then when we're all done with the loop after the curly brace here, so we're going to loop, and then after the loop we're going to add all of the output to the product div with jQuery HTML. So my page immediately loads the products here by calling the function once when we load the page, but what happens when we submit a product, right? So if I submit a new item, we're in this block of code here, and we create a new parse object to name the table we want to query, or we want to insert into. We create a new instance of that table, right, or a new object for the table or record, and then we set some variables on it, name and price. So set name, set price, and then we call save on the object. So that uploads the data to Parse, and then Parse returns to us with either a success or an error, okay? And if it returns to us with a success, then the object was saved successfully. And at this point, my app is just it's just printing a console message to say save success, and it it just tells us that it worked, right? So what I think I'm going to do is, and we can do one of two things. We can use get product here to load all the data again and refresh the view up above, or Parse actually just returns the object that you created too, so we could actually just use this object and add it to the end of the product list. So it's kind of up to you what you want to do. If we did it by calling get products, then we're going to create another query to the server. That takes a little bit more overhead, but we're going to get exactly the data. If we append just a new paragraph to the end of this products div, then maybe that's a little less accurate, and we have to make sure that when we add that, it's going to read correctly, right? I'm just going to call on get products here. That'll be the easiest route. Let's see what happens, right? So I'm going to refresh my page. So I load the new JavaScript, the changes that I made. And then I'll say, let's make a new product called pens and paper. Okay, and it's probably worth like $3 $3.99. Oh, maybe my number field doesn't allow for decimals. That's okay though. I'll hit submit. Oh, let's see. It's not going to let me do that. Let's just call it $4. Why $3.99 anyway? Let's see. Let's submit. Oh, look, and there's pens and paper shows up on the end. So that's pretty good, right? So that's kind of getting our site to work well there. And now what I'd like to do is I'd like to create a detail view. And the detail view is going to appear, let's say, above the form here, right? And if you click on a product, it'll say the product name and price up here. And if we had more information, we could display that also, right? Like maybe every product has a description and an image or something, right? But, essentially what I want to do is I just want to be able to, click on this item and then show more information about it up at the top, okay? So let's set that up. I'm going to go into my page here and let's take a look at our markup. So my page is built in one div here called main, and then inside the div there's two elements. There's a form and then the product div. Okay, so the form is this area here with the two fields and the button, and then everything below that is the products div. So what I think I'm going to do is let's put a div around the form here, just to kind of mark it off, right? And then above the form, right above the form here, I'm going to include another div, and this will be our detail view. So let's put a comment here, product details, and then up here we'll give it a name. Well, why don't we call it product details, okay? So this guy's ID name, product details, and then we can use that ID name with our JavaScript to insert, markup or text in here, okay? So now we need to create a link that's going to handle getting our product details, and then we need to get the product details. And there's two ways we can do this. Our link can either make a query to the server and then display the product details, right? Load them from the server. Or the link, if we save the results here, right, then our link can search through the results to find the details locally. So the thing here is if the information on the server updates often, then we probably want to load the data directly from the server. In my case, if I'm just showing products in a store, they probably don't change that often. So maybe since we loaded all the data once, it might be good just to use the data that already exists here. Okay? So to make that happen, I'm going to make a variable up here called product data, okay? We can just, actually, you don't even have to give it a value, right? But I'll just set it to an empty array, right? And what I want to do is after I load the results here, after I actually right here where I load the results, what I want to do is I want to assign the results to product data. So I want to say product data equals results, okay? So there we're going to save the results, okay? And now I have all this data here that displays a product, right? And what I'd like to do is I'd actually kind of like to move that into some other function that is going to, going to store this kind of more, a little better, so we're a little more organized. If I leave it in here, I'm kind of mixing too much stuff into this get products function, right? So get products maybe should only go out on the web and get the products. It shouldn't worry about displaying them, right? So maybe I'll make a function down here. Display products. Okay. There we go, display products. And then what we want to do here is we want to say, like, do everything that we did here, but do it inside display products, right? Let me format that a little better. And I don't know why these tabs are just not working out for me today. Yeah, there we go, right? So we'll make that look nice. And then, I have one other thing that I want to do here, right? So this is using results as the source for the data that it's going to display, but the results variable doesn't exist inside this block of code. So what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to take this product data variable and we're going to use that in place of results. Okay? So everywhere results appears in here, we're going to use product data. Okay, so now, if we were to call on display products, we'd set output to the empty string. We'd loop once for every item in product data. We'd get the name from product data, get the price from product data, console log the name and price. Maybe we don't need that anymore. And then we'll add, a paragraph with the name and price to output, and then when we're done, we'll display the output, right? So that's working out okay, but it's not going to display anything yet. We'll have to call on product data, right? Or display products, first. So up here on a success, after we set product data, why don't we call on display products? Okay, so now once we call get products, we'll load them. And then when we're done loading them, we'll assign the data to this variable for later use. And then we'll call display products to display all the products, right? Okay, and then our products will display down here. Okay, so let's just give that a quick check here to make sure everything's still working. Oh, it looks like it's still working, right? So it's all displaying. And so now let's work on this a little more. Okay, so we got display product here, right? And what I want to do is I want to modify the output so it also includes a link. Okay, so the link, I got to fit it in here. Let's imagine, if I have some JavaScript here, really what I want to create is a paragraph with a closing paragraph. And right now I'll have the name. It'll be like name, and then the price, might sit right here, right? So what I want to do maybe is wrap the name in an anchor tag. Something like this, right? Okay, and then you can click on the name to display details about the product. You can include this in the anchor, or whatever you want to do. But essentially we want to squeeze this anchor tag into here. So how do we do that? Well, what I'm going to do is add another line here, because if I do, we could squeeze it all in on this line, but it'll go off the screen. So sometimes it's easier to just, use this plus equals every time you want to add a new string, and then we're sort of appending to this. So maybe I'll do it this way. I'll say, name, or a paragraph, and the name right here. Maybe I'll put here, right? Let's do it like this, right? So imagine like I took all that stuff, and then here I'm going to add the paragraph tag, and then over here I'll add the name, right? And then I wanted to put this href right here, so maybe I'll squeeze that in right here. Since I'm using the double quote on the outside, I got to make sure to use the single quote on the inside, right? And then I'll add these guys, and now I want to have the closing paragraph right here, and then this, I guess that looks okay, might be nice. What if we put this on the next line there? something like that, right? We'll have to get rid of this plus sign there, right? So now that kind of reads, reads okay. Not great, but not so bad. Maybe I'll take this out here, and well, maybe I'll leave that there. Anyway, that looks all right. So here we're going to have paragraph. It's going to have an anchor tag. It's going to have the name and the price. Maybe we should do this. Let's put the price here on its own line. There we go, right? So then it'll be name, price. Maybe I'll do it this way. I can't decide. How about like that? Yeah, it'll be paragraph, anchor, price, closing paragraph. And so this anchor tag here, let's talk about this for a minute. Okay, so we got an anchor tag, and our anchor tag needs to have a link of some kind, right? It also needs to reference an item in the product data, okay? So every parse object has a field called product or object ID, okay? So the object ID field is going to tell us, it's going to give us like a unique identifier. It's going to tell us like, what that product is uniquely. Like there's no other way to identify it. These are all unique. No one else will have, or no other object in this table will have this as an identifier, okay? So, if we ask for an object that has this ID, then it's only going to give us this one, okay? We won't be able to get another one from that, okay? So we can use the ID here. We can name each product with the ID, and then the ID can, we can retrieve it when we click on the name, right? So we can put it in a couple places. We could put it in here as the href. I'm actually just going to put the hash mark in there for now. Another way to use this is to create a custom attribute. So I'm going to do it this way. I'm going to say data ID equals. And for custom attributes, you should always use data dash in front of the name, okay? So regular, standard attributes, the built-in ones, we'll just use the name. For the attributes that we invent, we'll put data and dash in front of the name. So the attribute value always needs to be quoted. So I've put the single quotes here. But now I need to insert the ID of the product, right? So I'll have to close my string with a double quote. So that closes the string here. And then I'll have the plus sign to add a value. And then I'll begin, I'll end with a plus sign, and then I'll open the double quote here to continue the string, okay? So now let's get the ID. I'll just make a variable called ID here. And to get the ID, we're going to just do this. Okay, now you'll notice with all the other parse properties, we say get and the property name. The ID name is special, and we don't have to say object ID. We just say ID, and that'll give us the ID name. Okay, so we just say product, at this position in the array, .id, and then it'll give us the ID of that product. And so now I can just insert ID right here. Let's give it a try. So we'll go back to our site here. We'll refresh it. And then there's all of our links. And if I right-click and inspect element, you'll see that this is the anchor tag we created, and then there's the ID. So this ID is 2XBMROT something, right? So that says Apple. Let's go look. So I go over here, and it says 2XBMR. Oh, look, it's an Apple for $33. Okay, so that's working okay. When I click on these, nothing's going to happen. We're going to have to add a JavaScript for that, right? So like I said, we're going to click on this link, and we want to get the ID, and then we want to search through the product data, right? So let's make a another function here, and let me make a spot here. Let's say get product for ID, right? And then we'll pass the ID value to this function, and then we'll we'll just search through our data, right? So we'll say for var I in product data. And so for every item in product data, let's go look at its ID value. Let's say, hey, you know, if product data bracket I, so item I, if the ID of that item is equal to ID that we pass to the function, then we want to display the data for that product. So we'll say var output equals something, and then we'll say actually we can just start here. Let's do we'll just make an H1 tag, right, with the name and the price in it. So I'll say, you know, H1, and then we'll say, you know, output plus equals actually, you know, we don't even need that. Let's do, we got to get, actually, you know, we got to get the name. Let's get the name here. We'll say product data bracket I dot get name. Let's actually say var name equals that, just like we did up here. And then we'll get the price. Okay, so we'll get price there, and then now we can add the name. So let's do name, right? And then maybe I'll add, we'll just do it here, right? So we'll say plus a space plus the price, right? And then maybe on the last line here, we'll add the closing H1 tag. So, you know, I think that reads okay. And then our last step is we want to add the add this markup here to product details, right? So put output here, right? So remember our product details div, you know, this guy has product details as its ID, and so if we set the HTML, we'll be putting text here where this comment is, and down here, you know, when we call on this, we'll pass it the ID of a product. We'll search through our array, and then if we find one that matches this ID, we'll get the name and the price. We'll build a string to display, so it'll have an H1 with the name and the price in it, and then we'll put it into that div above by setting the HTML, okay? And then to this output, right? So now, how do we get this product ID function? How do we call that from a link, right? So now remember, these are all of our links here, okay? And the links are inside of this products div, okay? So let's set up a jQuery function to handle that. So what we're going to do is we're going to say products on, okay? And on is going to allow us to to defer the event on, you know, depending on what happens in the future, right? So, you know, in our case, when our page loads, really the products here aren't going to be displayed yet. So this div, when the page loads immediately, is going to be empty, Okay, I mean it only takes a moment for the products to load, but what's happening really is when the JavaScript loads, this jQuery action right here is going to happen before the products are returned from the database. So if we tried to add a click action to those links, they wouldn't exist yet, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to say on click, and on's going to allow us to defer an action until a future, thing might happen. And in that case, what we're going to do is we're going to say, hey, if you click on products in the future, if a selector in there, like let's say an anchor tag was clicked, then execute this function. Okay, so if we add, this means that if we add more anchor tags in the future, then this click action is still going to be good, right? And we're going to include the event object here, and then we're going to say, if you click on one of those anchor tags, let's get the, let me actually move this up here so we can see it closer to the markup that it's going to work with, right? So, if you click on the anchor tag inside products, it's going to be this anchor right here. And what I want to do is I want to get the data ID. So I'm going to say var ID equals, and in jQuery, if you use this, that'll be the anchor tag that you clicked on, right? So in our case, we're adding a click action, and this will be the anchor you clicked on. And then we can say dot attribute, and that's going to, allow us to access one of the attributes in here, and we'll name our attribute, right? So that's going to be data ID, and that'll be the value here, okay? So now that we've got the ID, we can call on our function below here, and pass the ID to the function, and then it should display the details, okay? So let's give it a try. Let's refresh, and then I'll click on nuts and bolts. Oh look, and it appears at the top. Mental floss. Toothbrush, right? There you go. So there's a simple example with Parse. Hopefully that's helpful to someone. I think this is a really great tool. Everybody should give it a try. I mean, my example is pretty dog simple, but I think like for the amount of functionality I'm getting with the database and storing data, we really didn't do a whole lot of work. And if you do your work in JavaScript, you'll notice that we didn't have to do any work on the server side, right? Parse is doing all the work for us, and we don't have to write any server-side code. We're doing everything on the front end, which is kind of amazing, really. Okay? Thanks for watching.